I start recording. All right. Now the recording should work as well. I'll share my screen. And okay, welcome to this presentation on researcher career. And I'm really happy to give this presentation on what it is like to work in a university, work for universities, and being a researcher, teacher at universities. And of course, my perspective is from the Finnish university system. So the university systems differ from across the world. So there's different kind of paths, different kind of systems, different kind of career paths, and so on in different countries. And what I'm presenting here is mostly how the Finnish system works. But I would say that all the rules and or like the principles are the same, no matter what country you are in, and or even what topic you are studying. So I'm myself a graduate of a business school. I did my PhD in 2013 on developing market segmentation methodologies in rural tourism, especially how information and communication technologies have affected market segmentation. And I'll reflect a little bit on my own experiences during this presentation and how I got to where I am right now, and what I've learned and observed about the academia and the university life so far. Well, let's start with kind of like structure of this presentation, and how this is like a simplified model of an academic career. So you start with master's degree, where our program is at this point. Either you do the bachelor's degree and master's degree at the same, like consequent one after another, or then you do a bachelor's degree in one university and then continue master's degree in some another, or work or something like that. But nonetheless, to be a PhD researcher, you need to have a master's degree, and typically you need to have a master's degree with good grades. So the university system works in a way that we are trying to find the most promising students who have succeeded in their academic studies well to become PhD researchers. Because what like many students get a feeling of academic life and what it's like to be a researcher when they are working on their master's thesis. And if you enjoy your master's thesis and find it interesting, then the university career might be good for you. And especially if you do a great thesis, then it opens up doors for becoming a PhD researcher in different universities. And in Finland, we have universities of applied sciences as well as these research universities. And University of Eastern Finland is one of these research universities. And we have the capability and permissions to train people with a PhD. So that's how research universities differ from universities of applied sciences. Well, then you do your PhD studies. It's still, we used to talk a lot about PhD students, and still in out there in the world, PhD student is typically how someone doing a PhD is described. But in Finland, there's been a big discussion lately that actually they are not students anymore. So they are highly educated, they have master's degrees, they are you know, after master's degree you could go and basically do anything you like. You'll go to work in a business, start your own business, whatever. You have the expertise to do that. And PhD researchers should be thought as a career or as a job instead of something that people do for studying. And I think that's a sound discussion, and indeed doing a PhD is a full-time job. It's completely different from from studying as we think about it in universities. The project is completely different than just doing courses. Well, as a PhD researcher, you when you finish your thesis and your studies, you get to become a postdoc or a faculty member. These go kind of like hand in hand. And I'll discuss them together. But there is it's a special period of time when you have finished your PhD, and then you start finding out what you want to do after that. You can find postdoc positions, which are kind of like researcher positions, or work in a faculty, work in research projects for a university. And then after 5 to 10 years, it depends. You typically start applying for professor positions. There's many different kind of professor positions. We typically call it a tenure track system, where you are first hired as assistant or associate professor, and then gradually meet all the goals and expectations placed on you to become a full professor. And typically the deans and rectors of universities are professors who are specializing in managing the university. But in addition to, like, this is the, if you spend your whole life in academia, this is typically how your career becomes. Not, there's many professors who are not at all interested in becoming a dean or rector. So it's just kind of like an alternative path for professors. But in any case, at any point, you can move to private sector. There's also many research institutes that work outside universities that are studying, for example, technology or something else, that hire a lot of people with a PhD. You can always become an entrepreneur or even a manager for a business. So especially now there's been great stories from the United States, where companies are now not only hiring people who have graduated from business studies, but also from humanities and other fields, because what the university does for you is it teaches you certain kind of thinking, scientific thinking, and that kind of thinking is really useful for businesses, where you basically can test out or like define hypotheses, collect relevant data, test them out, draw conclusions, and come up to make decisions based on sound thinking, instead of just how you feel like. As well as researchers are great at adapting to new information. As a researcher, you should have open mind, and you should be able to analyze your own thinking and be less biased on all the issues with human mind and how we think, and how we for example try to keep out everything that doesn't fit into our own thinking, whereas as a researcher you actually embrace everything that is not congruent with how you think at this moment. So researchers are welcome and should be welcome to new ideas, and especially how they are argumented, thinking about the bigger picture. But this is kind of like the typical path for university researcher, somebody working in a university. You can also work in a university as a researcher, as a faculty member, without a PhD. But there is a clear transitional movement towards that people working in a university, especially in teaching and research, should have a PhD. So it's kind of like it's starting to become a permission to work for a university to have a PhD. and typically the university career also helps you to get that PhD degree if you are interested in it. All right. I think one of the big discussions that have to be connected to this presentation is the whole reasoning for universities and why they exist. So in many countries, like in Finland, the universities are funded mostly by the society. So we don't have that much private funding. They come from the Ministry of Education, which gets its funds from taxpayers. So in the end, the society has come to the conclusion that universities are kind of like an investment, something that is worth investing money in, because the benefits universities create are bigger than the costs that society has in running these universities. And how this impact on society, this positive side of society, happens from universities is that universities are places where we do research. So the research is kind of like the basis of what universities are good at, and the core action of universities, which also means that the education we do at universities should be based on research. It's not based on popular opinion, or it's not based on what consultants think or whatever. It's based on scientific knowledge, scientific research that has been conducted in universities and other institutions that are publishing their research in scientific forums, which are typically journals and books that are peer-reviewed. So other scientists review everything published in these journals and decide whether or not what is being said in these research papers and articles is valuable for the society. And this peer review system has, of course, received a lot of criticism. That is, of course, great to discuss. But it's still the best system we have at this moment. But it's still one of those things that we will probably see developing in the future. Well, then, of course, education. So in universities we do bachelor level education, master level education, PhD level education, as well as, for example, University of Eastern Finland has Open University, which welcomes people no matter what is their background, what kind of degrees, whoever can study at the Open University. So we tend to have, again, research-based education. Even though it's an open university, also that education provided by the universities should be based on research. And then research has direct societal influence, either through education or directly, meaning that when we publish a new research, we tend to disseminate its knowledge, or in best case scenario would disseminate its knowledge with businesses, with governmental organizations. Think about the policy implications, but also that we do research and do do research-based education means that people graduating from the university should have the latest knowledge on what is happening in their own field in science. And then when they graduate and start working for businesses, they are having a societal influence by taking these ideas from universities, the things that we've learned through research, into the actual world, in the businesses and organizations where they work after graduation. And all of these lead to impact on society. And universities have been found to have huge potential impact, not just economic impact, but also well-being and other measurements that have been used to measure the impact of universities. And that's why societies keep, at least many societies keep investing in universities and things that are happening in universities, because in the end it turns it brings more benefits for the society than what it costs. And this is kind of like the logic how I think about the role of universities in societies and what we do. So it also, this picture has the three main things for universities, which are research, education, and societal influence. And typically, and research has been like the big thing in universities, the most valued thing. And for example, if we look at the university career paths, there are very few, that the career paths for people focusing on education are not so rewarding as people focusing on research. So the universities have been for a very long time research driven, but lately in Finland also we are seeing better discussion on importance of education as something that universities do, and I think we need all these three. We of course need research. I don't think universities are of no use if we don't do the research, which we then transfer through these mechanisms into the society. And sometimes this transfer can take 5 minutes, sometimes it can take decades, but it does happen in many ways. All right, so if we start the researcher career and where it starts, it's of course the master's degree. You have to complete some kind of a master's degree. It's in Finland it's 5 years when you do bachelor for 3 years and then master's degree for 2 years, and it gives you the basics of scientific thinking. It gives you skills and knowledge to apply scientific methods to a research context. It gives you certain kind of thinking models, how to do things in a way that can be assessed by others. I think this peer review system of universities is valuable, that we have to be transparent in what we do and give it for others to estimate and assess, and that's a great also management principle. As I said earlier, the success in master's thesis studies is typically something that enables you to do PhD studies, or at least it makes it easier for you to find a program to do a PhD. But even if you don't get a great grade on your master's thesis, for example, it is possible to get into a PhD program, for example, if you manage to develop skills and capabilities required to do a PhD after your master's, but it definitely helps to have a good master's thesis. And it's a starting point. It's like you get some kind of an understanding of what it is like to be a researcher when you do your master's thesis. It's the closest thing, if you are thinking about the researcher career, is when you're working on your master's thesis, that if you enjoy the work, if you enjoy thinking about what needs to be known and how to study that and how to report that and how to what kind of conclusions and decisions we can make based on that data that you are collecting, then it gives you a good indication that maybe doing a PhD is something you should think about. And typically doing a, like, it's somehow strange that when you do a master's thesis, you are ready to work in basically any business. So it gives you kind of like opportunities to and interest for many businesses to hire you. But then when you do a PhD, it's been typically that then you are not of any interest for businesses anymore. They think you are overeducated, and the possibilities of working in the private sector, for example, after you've completed your PhD, have traditionally been not so good. But this is also changing. So I've been really happy to see that more and more academics are also finding positions outside the universities lately, especially in Finland. But it also tells that businesses are starting to value the thinking and the skills and knowledge that you receive during your PhD. So PhD, it shouldn't be just that it prepares you for a researcher career, but it prepares you basically for any career, as we can see here. So the main thing about being a PhD researcher and how it differs from masters is that in masters you tend to apply previous knowledge, for example, to a new context. Whereas as a PhD researcher and as a researcher in general, you have to be able to generate new knowledge. It's not enough just to apply what you've learned, but you have to be able to come up with something new, and not just new, but also something worthy of investigation. It typically takes 3.5, 4 years, depending on the person, to and depending on the possibilities that have been granted for the person during to work for their PhD, because there's many different paths and possibilities to obtain a PhD. And some of them, like if you are fully funded, working in a project related to your dissertation or PhD topic, that's kind of like the best possible outcome. For example, I had the pleasure of working in a rural tourism project, or actually 2 different rural tourism projects, where I was getting a normal salary while being able to do my own PhD at the same time, almost 3 years out of the 3.5 that it took for me to finish my PhD. So, but that's a very rare occasion that you can combine your work with your PhD, and I was happy and privileged to get that opportunity. Typically, many PhD researchers, people working on the PhD, are working outside university. So some people even have their normal day job, and then they try to work with PhD at the same time. And that typically means that it can take even 6-7 years to finish a PhD, which is of course understandable. Universities hire project personnel, as I was a project personnel working in a project, but also after your graduation you can work as a lecturer or fully funded, partially funded PhD researcher at the university. There's some positions open. They are very competitive, very valued, that university pays for PhD researcher just to do his or her research, which is also fantastic opportunity. There's also possibilities of working as a teaching assistant, lecturer, or something else at universities, where you get to allocate a part of your work time into doing your research. Then there's also many scholarships available, where that you apply for a scholarship for your research, which is from outside organization like institutions, and there's actually many organizations that grant these scholarships for PhD research, and they are typically not that big, and they allow you to work like a year or 6 months, and you get 1,500 or something like that euros per month. So they definitely don't get you rich, but it's a great supplement for everything else. But typically you have to piece together different projects, scholarship work, and have many different kind of situations when you are doing a PhD at the university. PhD consists in our system 1 year of supportive courses, master level courses, PhD courses for 60 ECTS, and then PhD thesis, which is 180 ECTS. And if we compare master's thesis with a PhD thesis, just looking at the ECTS, doing a PhD is kind of like same than doing 6 master's theses. Maybe if you're really focused on your master's thesis, one PhD is 3 to 4 master's theses, or even less, but it depends on the topic and the person, and so, but it gives you some kind of a comparison what it is like to do a PhD. So you really have to enjoy the research process if you are interested in doing a PhD. The time when you are doing a PhD is also really important to build international experience and international networks. You go to many conferences, you present your research papers there, your research ideas for your colleagues, for professors, and you get feedback from them, you get ideas, you find the people who are doing similar things, who are researching the things that you are researching, and trying to build networks with them. And it's sometimes called that doing a PhD is kind of like a driver's license for academic research and academic career. So it's something you need to do. It teaches you a lot. So what you learn during a PhD is how to manage your own time schedules, project management, writing, scientific thinking, many data analysis methods, which are always valuable, quantitative research, qualitative research, and so on. And also how to come up with innovations. So, or at least ideas, and take them into practice. So it's I would say definitely a different kind of journey that you would do compared to any business, for example, that you would work for. But it's very similar, kind of like to entrepreneurial career. And especially when you finally get your driver's license, you finish your PhD and defend it successfully, then you have the postdoc or faculty phase, which kind of like we talk about academic freedom quite often, which is great. So then you have your driver's license. You can basically drive anywhere or do anything you want. But that's more or less that the real work is actually just beginning after doing the PhD. Then it's the postdoc phase or faculty phase, where postdoc is someone who is more focused on doing research, and this is typically what many people who finish a PhD want to do. They want to find a postdoc position where they are able to continue doing their research, continue the research they did for their PhD, or even doing something completely different from their PhD. And that's what academic freedom is all about. That if you do your PhD in market segmentation, it doesn't mean that you have to do market segmentation for the rest of your career, but doing a PhD just gives you the skills and knowledge and viewpoints to virtually study anything that you have the skills and capabilities for. And there's great like for example, tourism research and tourism researchers. When you ask where they come from, there's physicists, there's people with PhD from chemistry and geography and business, of course, and computer science, and from many other fields. So I think that is what the academic freedom is all about, that you can then focus and start doing things that you're really interested about. Of course, it would be great if you manage to do your PhD also about something that you're interested in, but PhD it's just the start. Then you can also, after graduation, work for a faculty, work in projects, project manager, or as a lecturer, senior lecturer for a university. And typically, as a lecturer, you are focused on teaching and education, but in universities, you should always have also time to do research, because our education should be based on the latest academic research and knowledge, and that can only be achieved if you are doing research yourself, or at least heavily invested in research and read what is going on and so on. So lecturer career also should enable you, at least to some extent, to do research, but not to say that education isn't important, but I think it's the combination of being able to research the things that you're interested about and then teach them forward, and that's kind of like the best combination. I'm really happy that I'm in this position. So I study tourism business and how information and communication technologies affect it, as well as the role of tourism business in society in general. And these are the topics that I'm teaching at our tourism marketing management program. So it's a great combination for me, and something that we should aim for, in my opinion. It's also important that when you graduate and finish your PhD, you start building some kind of a research group. It might be an official research group, like we have. Our professor Raija Komppula has built this tourism business research group at University of Eastern Finland. But it can also be a network. It can be just people who think about the things that you are interested about, that want to solve a big question that everybody thinks of important, and then doing research with them. It's important to continue the networking that you've done during your PhD, to continue building the research group here. And typically research group needs funding. So if you are able to hire people to work with you in your own research group, you need some kind of funding. And that is typically why universities need this external funding. We talk about a lot about funding that is highly competed, that is offered by Academy of Finland or Business Finland or European Union, for example, that enable you to apply for a project, that this then give you funding to make that project happen. And then during that project, you are able to start building your own research group. And it's kind of like being an entrepreneur. So you have to be able to sell your ideas and find your own kind of like funding, just like being an entrepreneur. And it's very rare that someone else comes up with funding for you. But for many projects, of course, there are salaries for postdocs, meaning that projects funded by Academy of Finland, for example, can hire fully funded postdocs just to do research, which is also a great opportunity if you manage to get this kind of a position. Then, of course, doing a PhD is already something where you typically start publishing academic research papers, these journal papers I discussed previously. In Finland and in our business school, for example, our PhDs are typically article-based PhDs, so they consist of at least 3 papers published or submitted to academic journals, and then some short introduction section that ties all these 3 papers together to form this one big dissertation. And that means that our postdocs, our PhD graduates typically have a few publications already conducted or already when they graduate, which is a good start. but it's just the beginning. So you need to publish quite a lot in order to advance in your career. So researcher career is tied to how much research you can publish. And it's also tied to the level of journal where you publish in. For example, in tourism business or tourism field, we have few journals like Annals of Tourism Research, Tourism Management, Journal of Travel Research, that are highly valued by universities because they are ranked high in different international rankings. So you can try to publish many papers in not so high ranked journals, or you can try to publish a few papers in these highly ranked journals, or you can try to publish many papers in these highly ranked journals, but that's very rare to see at this point. Typically, that's a skill to have that you typically learn during this postdoc phase. And we are also calling, or the discussion around this issue is titled Publish or Perish, which means that if you don't publish enough papers in enough journals that are good enough, actually typically really high ranked, it will be really difficult for you to get this kind of, for example, funding. They always go through the applicant CV, and if they see that they don't have any publishing experience, it's very difficult to get funded, and or any kind of like tenure track positions. They all look at your publication profile quite a lot. So university work is mostly seen, especially from the hiring perspective, that if you want to succeed in universities, you have to publish a lot, you have to secure a lot of external funding for your university, and you have to publish in highly ranked journals. And that is kind of like the current paradigm of how people are hired in universities. And if you don't manage to do that, you are going to perish. And you can all think about the pressure that this kind of system builds. And that also means that people in universities tend to work a lot more than what our contracts say. So for example, me, I have a contract that says that I have to work for 1,612 hours, and then me and my supervisor plan how I am going to use those hours during the year, how much I'm going to invest in education, how much I'm going to invest in research, how much I'm going to invest in supervising different projects, societal impact, faculty work, and there's quite a lot to do. And in many cases, the hours in the work contract are not enough to do extensive research. So many postdocs, PhD researchers tend to work a lot overtime on their research in order to get published, and we are seeing that the depression and burnout and things like that are way too common in academia. So it's a real danger, because it's just so competed field, and especially if we think of Asia or United States, the competition is really tough. And it's probably because the universities get funds for graduating PhD researchers, but they don't get enough funds to provide jobs for these graduated PhD researchers. So it means that there are much less positions than there are people graduating with a PhD, meaning that the competition for these few positions tend to be really high. I think the situation in Finland is not that bad. I would say that internationally, the Finnish university system also acknowledges better other achievements besides research achievements. So I think that's one of the strengths of our system. And they also understand the role of well-being in work and career, which is, or at least that's the impression I have, and hope that it's the correct one, because the academia is in big problem if we burn out all our PhD researchers right after they've received their PhD. And one of the big questions is, of course, that I would consider my career successful if I just managed to come up with one big innovation during my career. And like many of the researchers that are valued by the world, you just have to come up with one big idea, one big research innovation or research result that changed the way how society functions or how we think about the world. And this kind of thinking then can be contrary to this publish or perish line of thinking. So for example, if someone thinks of like when you go and really try to learn one topic, there's hundreds or even thousands of academic papers published on some of the popular topics, and if you try to understand all that is going on there, it might take you years to just go through the literature and build some kind of a synthesis. And if you don't publish at that time, it can it can block you many doors, even though those 4 or 5 years that you focus on one topic could lead to some kind of a big innovation in the end. So it's difficult situation. But nonetheless, this typically takes 5 to 10 years. You work as a postdoc or faculty member, and then finally you are able to become a professor or tenure track professor, and then dean or rector, which is kind of like the next step in academic pressure. It's great because the academic freedom is definitely true also for professors, but it's the career changes, and I'm not a professor, at least not yet, so maybe this is more on my perceptions as someone who has worked in universities for 14 years. But I see professor more as somebody who is trying to think about these bigger ideas and trying to even give back to the community. It's more about supporting others than doing your own career, because when you get, well, there's the professor and tenure track professor positions are different in a way that when you become a professor, then kind of like the official pressure stops being so high, whereas with tenure track positions, you have certain goals that you need to achieve every 2 years, every 4 years, in order to proceed with the tenure track. But nonetheless, when you reach the end, it becomes kind of like this supportive role where you try to help others achieve their goals and manage your research group, research team, research networks in a way that they contribute to the society and do research and education, social impact, and they enable others and do research. It's very rare, for example, for professors to be anymore as the first authors in a journal. They are more supporting PhD students, supporting postdocs, faculty members to succeed in their own research. And of course, this acquiring project funding becomes a big part of, or is a big part of being a professor. So it's about managing your own research team, and that needs constant funding. You only get limited amount of funding from universities, and they are mostly like education-oriented funding. So if you want to do research and have impact through research, you have to acquire external funding from Business Finland and Academy of Finland and European Union and many other sources in order to be able to run your team and do new research and hire new people and learn more about the topic that, or topics that you are interested in. But if you are hired as a full professor, that's often in Finland, at least, there's many positions where you are like, the university and the society trusts that you are a responsible person enough to focus the resources that the society gives you in the best way possible. And I think professors should be experts in this, that they are able to state what is important to study and why. So this is the last slide from my presentation, to boldly go where no man has gone before. And I think this is a good conclusion for why universities exist, why researcher careers are important, because researchers are the ones who go somewhere where no man has gone before. They are the ones who come up with new ideas. They come up with new understanding on how the world works. If we are ever able or ever going to build starships like in Star Trek or any other sci-fi movies, we need a lot of scientific research. We need universities to conduct that research, and we need societies to support universities to conduct that research in mathematics, in physics, in chemistry, in biology, in all of these sciences that enable us to build these engines and starships and metal alloys and electronics and computer programs and everything that is needed for these starships. Whether that takes 500 years or 50,000 years or so, it doesn't matter. It's clear that universities are needed to achieve this, and it's not just the like hard sciences that I mentioned, but we also need the social sciences like business studies and social geography and well, not geography, but humanities and all the others that keep the society alive for the next 50,000 years, in order for us to develop all these fantastic things that are enabled by science. And we are all standing on top of on the shoulders of giants, which is one great aspect of scientific knowledge, is that it accumulates. Everything is built on top of what has been done previously, and it takes us forward all the time as a society, as a human race. And I think that's a great way to conclude this presentation. So thank you for watching and listening.